Hello everyone and welcome again. This is the fourth webinar that I'm doing in lockdown here from my hometown in New Zealand. You'll see on the board here that we start at 1:30 Indian Standard Time. That's because I know so many of you are watching in India. So hello everyone in India, and I really hope that you're safe. We've managed to stay safe, my family and I, during this first week, so hang in there. But I wanted to take this opportunity during lockdown to try and make the most of it, give you something that you can do at home, and hopefully you can use this time to brush up on your IELTS skills. If this is the first time you're watching this webinar, my name is Greg. I've been an English teacher and ESL teacher for 15 years now. Most of that time I actually spent in South Korea, where I spent most of my time in South Korea at a university. So very familiar with academic English and also the IELTS test. I know for a lot of you that one of the most difficult parts of the IELTS test is writing task 2. Now, some of you are probably studying for the general training test. Some of you are studying for the academic test. So we're going to focus on writing task 2, which is very similar for both, right? So I think this is the best way that I can reach out to all of you and help everyone. This is the fourth webinar. So in previous webinars, I've covered an agree-disagree essay, 2 views and your own opinion, and an advantages-disadvantage essay. Today, we're going to look at an interesting essay. It actually covers 2 of the tasks. So there are actually 5 different kinds of tasks that you might get on writing task 2, being agree-disagree, 2 views and your own opinion, advantages, disadvantage. Next one is problem solution. And sometimes you get essays which pose you 2 questions. So I'm going to show you the questions soon, and you will see that this question deals a lot with problems and solutions, and it also gives you 2 questions to answer. So I want to thank again the volunteer who has sent in his essay. So really appreciate that. How this works is we get a subscriber or a viewer to send in an essay. Then I'm going to go through and talk about the good things and give some hints on how to improve. So hopefully this will benefit all of you. I want to give you a chance now. Maybe you've seen these flashing up on your screen as I hold them. These are the band descriptors. Now, if you're really serious about getting a good score on IELTS, you need to be very familiar with these band descriptors. So if you have them lying around printed out, I'll give you a chance to go grab them. If you wanted to Google IELTS band descriptors, bring them up on your device, take some time to do that. Otherwise, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reveal the question that you can read. And how this webinar works is we look at the four band descriptors, being task response, cohesion and coherence, lexical resource, which is a fancy name for vocabulary, and then grammatical range and accuracy. So grab the band descriptors if you have them. Otherwise, I'm going to show you the question that we're going to look at today. So here it is. Take your time. I'm going to read along at the same time, just Okay, I'm going to flip the page over. Again, if you feel like I'm not giving you enough time to read, please let me know. But obviously, during the rest of today's webinar, you're going to get a chance to read over again as I look at each page. But let's move on to, that was the introduction paragraph. Let's move on to main body 1. Okay, I just have a Okay, so let me know if you can hear me, and I'll just give you a second to check that you can hear me. Really sorry about that. Okay, how are we looking with the audio now? Just want to make sure it's working. Okay, thank you for letting me know, and sorry about that. I'm not really sure what happened there. But hopefully, while there was no audio, you had a chance to read this. I'm going to flip to the next page. And let's move on to the next part. Okay, so this is the end of main body 1. This is main body 2. Okay, I'll move on to the end of main body 2. And you might notice a big difference in my handwriting. That's because I wanted to get everything, the end of main body 2 and the conclusion, all on the one page for you. Okay, hopefully you've had enough chance to just have a read over that and get an understanding of the answer. I just want to start off again by saying thank you for submitting this. And there are lots of good things in this essay, which I want to point out. But let's go back to the question. Whoops. Okay, so I want to give you a chance at home to review again the 5 different tasks that you might encounter on IELTS Writing Task 2. If your answers are agree, disagree, 2 views and your own opinion, advantages, disadvantages, well done. Those are the first 3 that we've looked at in the first 3 webinars. This one here, I like to think of it as a hybrid. So it's actually a 2 questions task, but we can see it's really very similar to a problem solution essay. So in some ways, I actually think that the 2 questions types of essays are the easiest ones to answer, because if you answer these questions directly, you should get, well, I think it's easier for you to stay on topic. So if you just answer those 2 questions, you'll be doing well. So in previous webinars, you would have seen me with the introduction talk about three P's. So I'm just going to turn over to the introduction page. Now, so what we're doing here, when I'm looking at the band descriptors, the introduction paragraph is really important for your task response. If you have a good introduction paragraph, it's going to set up your task response for the rest of your essay. So the 3 P's, hopefully you remember: paraphrase, position, and preview. In terms of the paraphrasing, just going to flip back again. Just to make really sure you understand, this is the statement that you're given, right? So I'm going to just mark it out in red. This is what needs to be paraphrased, right? So these are the 2 questions you're answering. So you can think about the paraphrasing is here. And then, just in green here, your position and preview are going to be related to these 2 questions. So all of these things are going to be important in your introductory paragraph. So let's have a look at the one which has been submitted. Let's start with paraphrasing. Okay, so we can see here that I think the viewer has done a pretty good job of paraphrasing. So the viewer has taken the statement. It is often thought that the increase in juvenile crime can be attributed to violence in the media. So it is viewed by many. Now, I'm going to look at the grammar later on in the webinar, but I just want to highlight a few things so I don't forget them later. So I think that's a good example of paraphrasing. So with the paraphrasing, this relates also to vocabulary and also to grammar. So we can see some good use of passive voice, which is grammatical structure already. Now, in terms of the vocabulary, just want to underline this, because with your task response, this also is going to come into your planning, right? So I've mentioned this in every one of the webinars. I know you only have 40 minutes, and it's going to give you a lot of stress on the exam day. 250 words in 40 minutes. But it doesn't matter what you are writing, whether it's an IELTS exam or an essay for university. Planning is part of the writing process. So you need to take, I would say, 5 minutes at least to think very carefully about how you're going to answer the 2 questions. And during that planning time, I would start thinking about the key words. Now, I've been through this a couple of times, but with task response, you're not only thinking about how to answer the question, but you're also thinking about those keywords. So for me, when I look at this statement, A couple of keywords are juvenile and crime. Now, and probably violence as well. So I know we're skipping ahead a little bit here to vocabulary, but with the task response, with your planning, it's all kind of the same thing. So some of you may be wondering, oh, what is juvenile? How can I answer the question if I don't know what juvenile means? So at this point, I actually want to take a little bit of a break and then give you a chance at home. If you don't know what juvenile means, I want you to take a guess. Now, this is really important that you do this in your practice for the IELTS. There may be a time, unfortunately, it's not the best situation, but maybe on your test, you might get a word that you're not sure about. You're not sure about the meaning. So if you don't know what juvenile means, I want you to take a guess. I'll give you the answer in a few seconds, but what does it mean? Now, if you're still not sure what juvenile means, let's look at the word crime. And here's where you can use some grammar to help you guess the meaning. We know that grammar is a noun, right? So this means juvenile must be an adjective. So you can narrow down that the meaning must be an adjective that's related to crime. Now, some of you may have guessed violent, right? So it is often thought that the increase in violent crime can be attributed to violence in the media. If your guess was violence, I think that's a very logical guess. Unfortunately, juvenile actually means teenage. Right, so if you, now, let's say in the exam you thought it meant violent, then as long as you stick to that meaning throughout the rest of your essay, at least the examiner will be able to understand the logic behind your answer. Yes, you're probably going to lose some points because you haven't addressed the task precisely, you haven't addressed the meaning of the question, but it's better than just completely ignoring the question. So for the purpose of any viewers who weren't sure what juvenile meant, I just want to tell you now that it means teenage, right? So when I'm doing my planning, I would be thinking about these two questions, and I'd also be doing a brainstorm of these three keywords. So juvenile, now teenage is an adjective. Then I can look at all the different parts of speech. Teenager. Here's another noun, teen or teens. So all of these we're probably going to use plurals. Youths. If you really try and expand your thinking, you might even come up with something like high school aged students. And so here's our first one, juvenile. And what this means is during the rest of your essay, I recommend just cycling through the use of these words so that you have a wider range of vocabulary. This is all part of your planning. For the next one, crime. Now, this is a word, and you are going to come across these. In English, we have words which have a few different synonyms. Can you think of a synonym for crime? So if you were struggling, that's fair enough, because there aren't really any synonyms that come to mind for crime. But what you can do, crime is a noun. Then what you might want to do is work in the adjective form, right? So crime is a noun. These are all, this is what we call part of speech. So in previous videos, I've mentioned that. So what I mean by that is if you can't think of a synonym, the next best thing you can do is think of a different part of speech. So, and the last one, violence. Now, again, a word which doesn't really have a lot of synonyms which are going to spring to mind, but here is the adjective form. Right, so this is all part of your planning stage. Just very quickly get down some synonyms, some other ways of saying these keywords. That's also going to get your brain into gear thinking about the task. Then I would think straight away, how am I going to answer these questions? Do you agree that this is the main cause of juvenile crime? Now, for any IELTS essay, this is my tip for your task response. Choose the easiest response, the one which is easiest for you to talk about. Now, in this case, I would just say yes. Yes, it is the main cause, right? And I'm going to start giving you a little outline. So without going into the introduction paragraph, today I just want to show you a bit more of the behind the scenes planning part. So this is before we go on to the introduction. I'd be looking at main body 1. Yes, right? And then I would just try to think of some reasons why. Why is this the main cause? Now, a couple which come to mind. Now, this actually relates to a question I had from a viewer. It was, what's the difference between an IELTS paragraph and a simple paragraph in any other form of writing? There is no difference really, but to get a good score in IELTS, if you look at task response, you have to develop the topic. So I'll write that up. Right, hopefully you can see that. So what I'm doing in my planning here is I'm actually planning how am I going to develop the topic. Now, I think it's easiest to say yes because that connects to the next question. So when I'm planning, I'm thinking of probably 2 reasons should be enough to develop the topic. One that I like to think of is copycat behavior. Right, so if you're not sure about the meaning of this term, what it means is monkey sees, monkey does, right? So teenagers, juveniles, not suggesting they're monkeys, but what they do is they play a violent game, they watch a violent movie, then they copy that behavior that they've seen, right? So now, what's another reason why it's the main cause? So I'm just going to keep my computer turned on so I can see your questions. So another reason it's the main cause is media is very violent. Now, in this planning stage, I'm only brainstorming, but when I actually go to write this, I might put this one first and then this one second for the order of my supporting ideas. Now, this is really important with your task response. What solutions? So don't just give one, right? So it asks you, it's really important that you read that question several times. This is why we're focusing a lot on the planning stage for this webinar to make sure that you are doing it the right way. What solutions can you offer? So what I would actually have is maybe main body 2, maybe main body 3, right? So solution 1. Now, I'm not going to go into the solutions I would use because I want to get back to the essay. So hopefully, thank you for that question about the difference between an IELTS paragraph and a paragraph in any form of writing. We're going to look more at that paragraph structure, but this will give you an idea about the length of the paragraph and what you need to cover in any IELTS paragraph. So just to recap, you would need, I think, a couple of supporting ideas to develop the topic. So that's the main difference. You need, well, to get a good score in IELTS, develop the topic. So let's get back to the introduction. Now, again, if you didn't have a chance to take these notes, this video will be put up again on the grade Facebook page. So anything that you didn't note down, it'll be up there for you to look at later. So we can see the paraphrasing, and we're left with the position and preview. Now, I agree that such innocence is endangered by exposure to this violence. Now, yes, I know that there are some errors here. We're not going to correct everything in the writing. I think the student is going some way to addressing the task, right? So remember, the first question was, do you agree that this is the main cause of juvenile crime? Now, what I would really like to see is something, more, is something clearer. So when you look at the band descriptors, it talks about having a clear position. That's why with the planning that I did before, what did I say would be my answer for this question? Right, so remember this one here. Do you agree that this is the main cause of juvenile crime? A clearer position would just be yes. Right, so I think that's definitely what I would suggest here. So I think this introduction is solid, but it could be improved and it could be clearer. After the paraphrasing, something like this. This is one that I've prepared earlier. Now, the reason I want to show you this structure, this sentence, is one that you can repeat for other essentially problem solution essays. In this essay, I will argue that and recommend that. I'm just going to put a blank here. Now, because I said that this essay is actually very, very similar to a problem solution essay, this is the kind of sentence that you could use in any problem solution essay. But in this case, what's happening, this is the first question here. So I'm actually going to flip this back over. So yeah, just again, I'm at home here. I don't have my wonderful digital whiteboard where I can just flick between everything. So sorry if I keep turning the page, but I just wanted to show you again. This is the first question we're given. Do you agree that this is the main cause of juvenile crime? That's where I put my answer. I will argue that. And here I would say this is hopefully you can see that, make that a clearer one. So to give you words, I would say something like, in this essay, I will argue that violent, and then I'll give some examples, violent video games, movies, and TV, right? So I'm expanding upon the use or the concept of violence by adding some examples, right? I can't really paraphrase the word violent, but I can do this. In this essay, I will argue that violent, so different part of speech, video games, movies, and TV can be, is the main reason for a rise in teenage crime, right? So do you want me to write that up? Probably. So what I'll do is I'll write that up in blue here. Just got a question, the comment, can you please write that? So in this essay, I will argue that violent games, films, I think I said movies, it doesn't matter, and TV are the main or major, because I'm just using a synonym, so major reason. Right, so I'm always, even in this case, I'm just paraphrasing. I'm showing off my vocabulary to the examiner for a rise. Well, sorry, in this case, we need to go with the, right? Right, so that's what would go here. I know it's a very long sentence, but it doesn't matter because I'm making my position very clear from the beginning. And here you can think about this. This is the preview of my other main points. So, but to keep it a little shorter, I'm not going to get into all the supporting ideas, but here I would just say a couple of things, right? Now, if I answered this, I would just probably say education, because I'm a teacher. And government regulations, right? So I would just choose these as my two solutions to this rise in teenage crime. Now, we're going to look at the ideas that the candidate has in their answer, and I think they're on the right track. But again, I definitely think that this could be a little clearer. So that's the one main thing I wanted to talk about. Okay, so going to erase this. If you didn't get everything written down, just let me know how I'm going with my speed. But remember, you can watch the replay. So, like I said, task response, really a lot of it comes into that planning stage. So I really want, I really wanted to show today the behind the scenes planning. So while I'm on film, it's taking me a lot longer. Hopefully in the actual test, that might take you, say, 5 minutes. That's why I recommend when you're doing your practice at home, yes, it's good to write 250-word essays, but I would spend a lot of time just practicing planning, right? So maybe for 3 questions, just practice planning, right? So get fast at planning. Then maybe the 4th essay, write the whole 250 words. You need to practice planning. So that's going to help you a lot because of that, because of those time restrictions. So I have a question here. Oh, yes, I've made a mistake. Sorry. So yeah, well done. You spotted my grammar error. So definitely there's one reason, so it's not plural. So it should be the main reason. I can't go back, but thank you for spotting that one. What I want to do now, though, is move on to coherence and cohesion. So it's really nice to know that you're watching very closely. If you notice anything else that you're unsure of, if I've made a mistake, just please keep letting me know. Also, that's something that would actually come up if I entered that essay into the grade website. There's an automated grading system. So if you put your essays into grade, it's also going to pick up on any grammar mistakes that you would make. So that's a good way of double checking your grammar as well. So coherence and cohesion, something I think that this this candidate's starting to do really well that I want to talk about today is referencing. So if you do have your band descriptors nearby, you'll notice under the heading Coherence and Cohesion that there is a mention about referencing, right? I'll just have to find it again. Where does it say it? Okay, you can see it under 6. So may not always use referencing clearly, right? So basically it's when you get to band 6-5, it starts becoming punitive. So what that means is they're telling you if you make mistakes with referencing, that you're going to lose some points. So that also means to get 7, 8, or 9 for coherence and cohesion, you need to use good referencing. Now, if you don't know what referencing means, I'm going to show you. So I'll give you an example. Now, this is not an Ielts type sentence. My name is Greg, and I like sports. I watch and play them. Right, so just to get back to those plurals, I think sports in this case is plural. So we have cricket, rugby, those are sports. So here's an example of referencing. We have a noun in the first sentence, and then I'm referencing it with the pronoun, right? So this is a pronoun. Them, sorry. So you need to do this in your IELTS essays. Obviously, you're not going to be writing these kinds of sentences, but I just wanted to give you a really easy example. So let's have a look here. Are there any examples of referencing that you can see? Have a look at home. Is there any referencing here? Now, this is where I think the candidate is going some way to giving good referencing, but you could do that, right? So there's no need to repeat violence or violent, right? So because this is referring to violence, right? And by doing referencing, it's also going to help you with your lexical resource or your vocabulary, because you're not overusing the same words, right? So, sorry, I've got another question. Okay, what I'll do, some of these questions I can actually talk about in the end. I think this one here is about something I've written on the board before. It's a very specific question. I'm definitely going to answer it, but just so we keep on track and it's easy to follow the lesson or the webinar, I will absolutely talk about a specific grammar question at the end, if that's okay. So let's just get back to referencing though for now. So sports, them. The idea here is that there is violence, right? So there's an increase in violence in the media, right? So there's really no need to repeat violence. So there's an attempt here at referencing, but it can be improved. Let's move on to the next page. And again, for coherence and cohesion today, I want to focus on referencing. Can you find any examples of referencing here? Okay, so like I said, I think this candidate is going a long way to using referencing well. if you've picked up on this one, right? So they. So what are they? And if you know that they are used in TV shows, this is good referencing in the essay. This is referencing in action. So well done. Next sentence, they have a strong influence over the kids. Well done again. So these and these gives rise in teenagers doing violent crime. So I know that one of the questions is about rise. I'm not going to forget that question. It is not unusual to see kids aged 12 to 15 rob or murder. So some really good referencing going on here to make this essay more cohesive and coherent. Let's just focus on that a bit longer. Now, this one here, I can see that there's an attempt at referencing. I'm actually going to talk about this one here as we move on to grammar, because I think we can avoid using this one. It's a little awkward, and I want to talk about that when we look at the grammar. Let's move on here. So anything like this, right? So even when, I know we have the noun after it, this is a determiner. We have the noun after the determiner, but just the use of this is so important because it makes, it makes it more cohesive, and you are asked to do referencing. So that is a form of referencing. Anything else that you can see there? Again, yeah, so I think in this case, to contrast it with the other example, here it is okay to say these crimes, because think about it this way. It's been a while in this essay since this writer has used the word crimes. So these crimes, that's okay, because the writer's reintroducing that idea after it hasn't been used for a little while. So this does become more natural as you use it more in your writing, but just think, if you think the reader needs to be reminded about crimes, then you can use it. But I'll bring back the example before. See, in my opinion, maybe you disagree with me, and this is where writing is also subjective, but in this one here, I think it's very clear, and we've only just spoken about the violence, right? So there's no need to repeat it so quickly. So yes, this is very subjective, but that's what I'm trying to point out is when you're referencing something that you've just mentioned, you don't need to include the noun again. Hopefully that makes sense. Straight away, you can see they. So any other referencing? This is the last page. See if you can pick up on any more referencing here. Now, you might be looking here. Now, here, films and games and series. Here is where I think this could actually be referenced. Now, I'll give you a chance at home to practice this. What's the pronoun that you would use in this case? Think about this. Is it the subject of this sentence or is it your object? Right, so in this case, this is an object pronoun. Here is violent film. Well, it should actually be violent films, right? So is violent films the subject or the object? If your answer is subject, well done. So that means for better referencing, which you score points for, I would go with they. So what I want to do now is move on to lexical resources, lexical resource, which is another way of saying vocabulary. And because lexical resource is actually hard to pronounce, I'm just going to say vocabulary. So with your vocab, right, lexical resource, hopefully, when you get into the main body paragraphs of your essay, you will already have a few keywords which you've already thought of synonyms for, right? So that's where I think you need to start incorporating lexical resource or vocabulary into your planning stage, right? So we talked about juvenile, teenage. Do you remember any of those other synonyms that I used before? If you had teenagers, right? So teenage is the adjective, teenagers or teens. I also had another one which was high school age students. So I just want to point out something. Now, throughout the essay, you may have noticed this already, that this candidate's used the word children. Now, what I assume is that this candidate, now I may be wrong, but perhaps this candidate thinks that juvenile means children. Now, in that case, I would say that this candidate's done well to be consistent with that meaning of juvenile meaning children. Obviously, it doesn't mean children. It's for, children are usually considered to be younger, like, probably below teenagers, whereas juvenile is that near adult age, the teenage years. And this is where there's another question here about referencing, where you can use your referencing to avoid overusing some of those keywords. So one question I have, referencing means the agreement of pronouns to the noun. Yep, that's part of it. So what it means is that you're using pronouns to instead of the same words again and again, right? Is it okay to use they when referring to objects, not a person? Definitely, yeah. So they are pens, sure. Or think about if I use my body language, these are pens. But yeah, they could be personal, it could be third person, it could be people over there, right? So I am Greg, you are the viewers. They are John and Mary, right? But it can also be things, right? So, or animals, right? So they is personal, it can describe people or things. Hopefully that answers your question. But yes, use them in your writing, right? So it does point out referencing. And again, I think this candidate has used referencing well. But, maybe you could, to avoid using the same keywords, you could also reference those keywords. So yeah, children, no, it should be juveniles, teenagers, teens, maybe high school age students, right? Or youths is the other one I said before. But there also are some examples of really good vocabulary use, which I wanted to point out. So in these webinars, I don't just want to be overly critical. I also want to highlight the good things which I see. With vocabulary, this is really your key, right? So the main thing you'll see on the band descriptors that really jumps out, I think, to everybody is use a wide range of vocabulary. In previous webinars, we've had questions, should I use heavy vocabulary? I think what that means is less frequently used words, right? So you need to try and incorporate words which are less frequently used. The other thing I'm going to talk about with vocabulary is collocations. Sorry, I'm just going to keep my computer turned on so I can see your questions. So these are three main things with your vocabulary. Think like this. This, I think, is the main one. If you have a wide range of vocabulary, it probably means you are doing these things anyway, right? So collocations, I'm going to talk about that soon. But in terms of some of the uses of vocabulary I see in this essay, I want to point out some really good use. Depicted, right? So I'm just using blue to highlight some of the vocabulary. That's an example, I think, of a less frequently used word. So I don't know how much English you use in your day-to-day life, or how much you watch on TV. How often do you hear that word, right? So think like that, right? So this word is less frequently used. Also with English, we have words which are more used in spoken English, and words like this, which is probably more academic, more used in written English. So definitely doesn't matter if you're doing general training or academic, try to go for some more less frequently used words, right? So that's why in previous webinars, we've looked at words like government, people, which are high frequency words, which you can probably use on different essays. Other ones which I thought were really good. So I'm not saying there weren't good ones here, I'm just picking up some key ones that I thought were great. Okay, something like this. Yes, this is becoming more and more used, but I think still it's, the other thing I like about this word choice is that it's topic specific. So I'm going to write that up here. Right, so that's also something to bear in mind. Make sure your word choices relate, well to the topic. So when we're talking about crimes and punishments, consequences, right? So consequence, great word choice. And one more, which I was really impressed with, is on the last page here. Curb, right? So obviously this candidate does have a really nice vocabulary, and he or she is going, some way to demonstrating to the examiner that they do have a wide range of vocabulary. Always think that you're showing off, right? So that leaves us with collocations. Now, some of you are probably wondering what a collocation is. Now, I mentioned earlier in my introduction that I lived in Korea for a very long time. So you're going to learn a Korean word, right? And it is now. I may not have spelt it correctly in English. I can write it in Korean, but you won't understand. So the Korean word for delicious. Right, so this is a Korean word. It means delicious, right? So maybe you do know some Korean, but when you go to Korea, you will hear this word all the time. It's one of the first words in Korean that I learned, right? So you'll hear everybody talk about 맛있다, 맛있다. You can also say this 맛있어요, right? If you've heard that word before. Now, it's a highly frequent word in Korean. So what I noticed when I was in Korea is obviously Korean students, when they learn English, they take the Korean word, look in their dictionary, and they see delicious. So what happens is this becomes a very overused word, especially by Korean learners. Maybe some other learners, if the dictionary takes the word for delicious in their native language and then translates it as delicious. But as a native speaker of English, when I talk about food being delicious, I don't just use the word delicious. And this is what I mean by collocations. So we'll think about the word food, which means noun. So we have the word delicious, delicious food, right? Now, we know what the word delicious means. Your challenge at home, I want you to think of other words which have the same meaning, which we can use instead of delicious to describe food. Now, I'll give you an example. I'll give you a hint. I can think of a very simple word that begins with G. So what is this word that I'm thinking of? It's a very short word. If your answer was good, well done. That is a collocation. Delicious, good. So delicious food, good food. If you said great, well done. That's also a collocation for food. So a word like food has many, many collocations. So what I mean is we don't just have to say delicious food, delicious food, delicious food. I could say delicious food, good food, great food, excellent food, amazing food, wonderful food. All of those words have the same meaning, but they all are natural collocations. That means that those words go together naturally. So in this essay, in any essay, you are marked on your use of collocations. So this means, do your words go together well, right? Do they go together naturally? And I think this candidate is starting to use some good collocations. But there are some which are a little unnatural. So I want to look at this one. Now, if you're at home and you're still wondering what I'm talking about with this idea of collocations, this is an excellent website, an excellent resource that I want to introduce you to. Now, there are other collocation dictionaries, but this is the one that I think is really simple for learners to use. So I want you to go to the collocation dictionary if you have a chance. If you don't, I'm going to write up some on the board. And I want you to type in, go to here, enter this word, threat. And hopefully, I'll put it up on my computer too. Now, if you have entered threat into the collocation dictionary, I thought I had it written down, but what you'll see, the best choice is reduce. Right, so here is an example of, I think this candidate has got some, is going a long way. His collocations or her collocations are developing, but here's an example where it's not quite natural, right? So maybe you've had a teacher in the past and the teacher said, oh, we don't say that. In many cases, that's what the teacher means. They're talking about collocations, right? So we don't say relieve this threat. Or if we do, it's not as common as saying reduce this threat, right? So hopefully that makes sense. So I just wanted to introduce this concept of collocations today, and we're going to look at more collocations as we go through these webinars. Just let me get your questions back on screen. So I think in general, there's some really good vocabulary on display. Maybe one thing to improve upon is the use of collocations. The other one that I would think about would be the word crime, right? Because with this essay, the word crime is going to be one of the keywords. Now, this is another example of a collocation. And this is where I don't want you to worry too much at home if you've never gone to a collocation dictionary before. You don't have to learn all the collocations in the dictionary. But hopefully, if you're given a choice of these two words, do we do a crime or do we commit a crime? Sorry, not me. Does anybody? Does a criminal do a crime? I'm not a criminal. Does a criminal do a crime or does a criminal commit a crime? So what do you think is the most natural word to use in that case? And if your answer was commit, why is that not working? So if your answer was commit, well done. That means you have a good understanding of collocations. Now, in many cases, these are just things that you would have learned naturally, but they are tested and they are mentioned on the band descriptors. So I just wanted to introduce this concept to you today. Then we're going to move on to grammar. Now, in the previous 3 webinars, I've talked a lot about complex sentences. I'm not going to go through those again today, but instead, I have one question here, which I just want to start off with. And the question is, why did you say the rise instead of arise? So I'll start off with a question from a viewer, and it's a really good question. So what's happening here is we are dealing with the definite versus indefinite article. Right, so the definite article is the, and the indefinite is or an, right? So if you're not sure how to use these, before consonant sound, not spelling, it's sound, and this is before a vowel sound. Right, so don't be confused with the spelling. We use a before a vowel, a consonant sound. So here is a really good one to remember. It would be a UFO. That's one which tricks a lot of people, right? Because when we say, this is an initialism, right? So unidentified flying object. When we say UFO, the first sound that I make is yeah. Just like the word yes, right? Or the color yellow. There is a lemon. I'll grab it for you, right? So from my lemon tree, right? This lemon is yellow, right? So yes, yes, it is a lemon, right? So the first sound is a consonant. So we say UFO. If it's before a vowel sound, I'm not going to get an egg out of the fridge, but we would say an egg. The reason I'm not going to get an egg out of the fridge is because I don't want to drop it on live camera. So the other difference in meaning, this is the easiest way to think about this. So to the viewer who asked this question, really want to thank you. It's a question I get asked often, I've been asked many, many times. And this is really hard, right? So if your first language is not English, it's probably, this difference is something that will take you years to fully perfect, and you may never fully perfect it. It's quite an easy concept, but it's hard to get it perfect. We use the main way we use the is when the reader or the listener knows what you're talking about, right? So that's the easiest way to think about it. So the reason I would say the rise is because I've already referred to it, right? So in my essay, I'll put the question back up so you know what I'm talking about. Right, so what would happen is in my introduction paragraph, I would paraphrase this. When I paraphrase this, I'm going to talk about the rise in violence, right? So I've already spoken once about the rise in violence. So then in the second part of my introduction, I would use the, right? So because I've already introduced that concept to the reader, so then the reader knows what I'm talking about, right? So if I said to you, look at the pen, you're going to know what I'm talking about, right? So that's there are many other uses of the versus and an, but the main one you're going to use in your writing on the Ielts is, does the reader know what the noun or the nouns are that you're talking about? If the reader does know or should know what you're talking about, then you go with that. So I hope that answers your question. It's basically, that's the main one we use. So any other specific ones, I'll just give you a chance. Oh, I have one more question here. So this is not about grammar. So not as much grammar today, because in previous webinars I've gone through complex sentences many times, but I do have one last question here, and it's about the grade website itself. So if you're using the grade website, hopefully you're not getting scores of 4, but I'll write the question up. Why does my score on grade keep giving me a 4? Right, so if you're not sure what grade is, this is what the view is talking about. So this is the website. Now, this website, it has software which can grade writing task 2 and writing task 1. So when the viewer is talking about a 4, what they're talking about is the score in relation to the band descriptors. Now, in my experience, because I give a lot of feedback on essays which people have submitted into the grade site, the main 2 reasons why you're getting a 4 is not always because your writing is not good. I talked to the software developer and he suggested 2 main reasons. Reason 1, your essay is too short. Right, so how many words do you need to write for writing task 2, whether it be general training or academic? How many words? 250, right? So with the grade site, from what I understand, the software developer has set a minimum limit just to encourage subscribers, users of the website to try and meet the word limit, right? Because in the real test, if you don't write, if your essay in the real test is too short, you're going to get heavily penalized. So that's a feature of the software. And the other reason, which we talked about in this webinar, is paragraphing. And again, what the software is trying to do is it's trying to identify it's trying to identify the key parts of the band descriptors. And paragraphing is mentioned throughout cohesion and coherence, right? So to avoid getting 4s, what I suggest is, or what the software developer suggests as well, leave a line space between paragraphs. Now, I just want to scroll down the list of questions and see if there are any more. So just 1 second. Okay, so I think that's it. So if you did have a question which I didn't get onto, please keep posting them onto the grade Facebook page. I really like getting the questions and trying to work them into my webinar. Yeah, we're all in lockdown. If you're in India, I'm here in New Zealand. We have a minimum of 4 weeks. We've just finished one, so yeah, it's not ideal, but it's just really, I want to say it really feels great to be doing something positive, to keep teaching, and yeah, just trying to help you all with your IELTS study. So hopefully that takes your mind off your lockdown as well. Keep putting your questions onto the grade Facebook page, and I will try and answer all of them. And just going to keep going through some more essays. So if you want to volunteer, if you would like to volunteer your essay for review on a webinar, there are 3 ways that you can do this. You can email this address here. On the grade Facebook page, you can send a direct message. If you're really bold and confident, you can also post your essay directly onto the grade Facebook page. But again, just a huge thank you to the 4 candidates who have volunteered their essay. Lots of good things in all of these essays, but hopefully through some of my feedback and some of my explanations, you can see how you might be able to improve them. And of course, you can keep using the grade website as well. Hopefully none of you are getting 4s, but hopefully these 2 answers help with that. So just, yeah, stay safe. I'll let you know when the next webinars are. So at the moment, and this could change on demand because I'm not going anywhere. I'm at home for at least another 3 weeks. The webinars are on Sundays, plural, right? Thursdays. Oh, sorry, that should be Tuesdays. And Sunday, what am I doing? I don't know my days of the week. Thursdays, right? So at the moment, and I doubt this will change, but it's 1 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Or will change. At the moment, that's 9 p.m. in New Zealand, but our daylight savings is changing soon. So I think maybe a couple of weeks later, the time difference might not be as big. Anyway, at the moment, that's how the schedule is, and I really look forward to seeing you on Sunday. So stay safe and keep in contact. Goodbye.